What is up, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I've got a list, winners and losers of the 2020 ban list, the January 20th, 2020 ban list. A ton of changes. This is probably the most brutal, the probably most influential ban list I've seen since I got back into the game like two and a half years ago. I mean, really, like, just demolished multiple decks, all the top, you could argue, 6 decks in the game, and also had a lot of ancillary hits as well, a lot of moves bringing stuff off the list, putting stuff a little bit on the list, but not all the way on the list, you know what I mean? So we're going to get into it. Let's start off with the winners. I don't want to waste too much time, so we're going to go right into the winners, because I think there's less winners than losers. So, starting with winners, we're going to start with anything that's like tier 1.5 to like lower tier 2, because like I think you could argue that like tier 3 decks, they're not like tier 3 decks aren't just going to jump into competitive relevancy, but I do think tier 2 decks can definitely make the jump if they're in position, and I think all the top decks getting hit possibly puts them in that condition. So I think Guru Subterrors is probably maybe the biggest one here, because I think a lot of players, if you ask them like what's the best deck that did not get touched at all from the list, and you're probably like Subterrors. And then there are a bunch of other ones that are like right there, right behind Subterrors that also could be mentioned here. So we're looking at Altergeist, very good option as well. Burning Abyss, even though Burning Abyss did lose Sekka's Light to 2 or to 1, we got another copy of Tour Guide. With like you can like I don't even know if like you don't even have to play Sekka's Light now, because it has one of like I'm not sure it's worth. So like what's the point? You could easily just play like just better spells, like just extending spells instead of draw power, and still just like maintain consistency. You don't get that power of the +1, but you still maintain consistency. So I think you'll be fine. Invoked Mech Knight or Pure Invoked, once like the new list comes out and stuff, this could be better. Heroes is a big one. Heroes have actually been doing pretty well lately. Expensive, but good. Trap Tricks is another one. They get new support in the next set as well. Paleozoic Frogs, another good one. Magical Musketeers, they've been doing pretty well as of late, getting some pretty premier tops. So then moving on to some other like specific decks that get a boost here. Deep Sea is the first one, or Deep Sea Merlantians, Deep Sea Mermail, Deep Sea Atlanteans, whatever you want to call them. The new archetype's coming in Eternity Code. This card is already good right now in Mermails as is, but also is just another copy of a really strong one-card starter once the new Deep Sea archetype comes out. So this one made sense. We kind of knew this was coming. Lightsworn. This is another one specifically for Damage Juggler. I mean, I don't know how much different Damage Juggler going from 2 to 3 actually is for this deck, but it's not bad. Like, and also just this is another deck that kind of has been teetering, and I've actually heard that this deck is better than people think it is. Obviously, you could have consistency problems, but that's always been a thing in Lightsworn, drawing too many of the cards you want to mill, whatever. Still, I've heard some pretty good things about it, and Damage Juggler only helps it, even if it is marginal. Unchained is another one that specifically more so because of Tour Guide. You could also argue like Evil Eye or Fluffles, like his Tour Guide just kind of specials. Edgem Chain straight from the deck, Saber. Edgem Saber straight from the deck. And for Evil Eye, you could just special summon the guy that specials himself from grave, link them both off for the link 2, then he can special himself back. So one card gets you the link 2 plus another body on board. As long as you had any other equip spell from there, you could be in a good position. But Unchained is another one as well. They play the level 3 Fiends as well. We have the new Fiend coming in the next set, or also as a promo in Special Edition Ignition Assault. So they can make use there. I'm not sure if it's like the best kind of synergy because it doesn't negate their effects on field, but still could be good. Lair of Darkness and Lilith. That's another one that's important, because a lot of people who play Lair of Darkness, myself included, will tell you that just getting to Lilith, even if it's off Tour Guide and her effects are negated, she can still activate her effects, so she can still tribute an opponent's monster for cost. She could still tribute herself, and then because she's in grave after cost, would be able to get you a trap from deck. Like, there's still, like, just getting to Lilith makes your deck so much better. And so this is essentially just one more copy of Lilith turn 1, which is really important, and so I am going to put that on here. I think that's actually pretty nice. Moving on here, we've got Prediction Princess. Now this one's really only making light of Morphing Jar number 2. I really don't think it synergizes with too many things other than just like a cheeky like FU deck. Other than like Prediction Princesses, I think it could have some synergy with a deck, a ritual deck built around like flip monsters, which is kind of cool. There, I don't really see it having too much synergy with too many other archetypes. This isn't really fossils. I guess it could be. I mean, we did have the information this week that Jim Crocodile Cook does get the win for the anime deck becoming real in the game, and it'll be fossils. But really, this is just any kind of trap deck gets a buff here. 1 from Solemn Warning, so you can, if you want to, place 9 Solemns in your main deck, or Red Reboot going to 1. That's also pretty huge. That is one of the most terrifying cards. I mean, really, ask any player that plays a predominant trap deck. I play Subterrors, and I specifically edited my list so I play more hand traps and only like 10 traps, so that cards like Red Reboot, Twin Twisters, Evenly Matched are not as brutal to me. I hold more cards in my hand, and so I just don't just get brutally punished by that as hard. So that's really, really nice for sure. Let's see, other than that, yeah, I think that's it for the winners. Yeah. Moving on to the losers. So we're going to start with the obvious ones. Everything that just got bludgeoned immediately on the list. Orcust. I still think Orcust can do some things, but God, it's so clunky now. Like, literally the difference in consistency without Harp is immense. Immense. It's not a joke. So yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Orcust to still play through this. We'll see what happens with Mech Knight Girsu. At least he's a 1-card Galatea, because that's one of the problems now, is possibly not even not consistently opening hands that can even get a Galatea on board. So you got to do what you can with what you got, I guess. Moving on, Thunder Dragons. Thunder Dragons might be, man, that's like their win condition's gone. The win condition is completely gone, so that's really going to kill them there. I just don't see them really doing much. Like, I don't think Titan is enough to make them want to do, especially a pure build, specifically pure builds. Salamangreat, Mirage Stallion. I think Salamangreat survive this. I still think they play. I think they honestly get off with the weakest hit out of the top 4 decks, but it is still a significant hit. You lose a very powerful extender. You lose one of the main ways to just deal with monsters on the board. Now I think the deck can definitely have a problem with struggling with big monsters that are kind of annoying to out. For sure, you lose some good stuff there. So yeah, Mirage Stallion definitely gotta go. Sky Striker Mobiling is engaged. Sky Strikers, man, they're so slow now. They're so much easier to break through. They don't have nearly as strong a resource game. Kagari to 3 is nice in the light of this, like kind of mitigating the loss. If they still only had 1 Kagari, oof. At least you can still grind, and I think that's what the deck becomes even more. It's already kind of a grindy deck, but even more so now. Pendulums. Pendulums just lose so much power with this. So much power, so much utility. You can't just send in a Morphage Sloth to the top of your extra deck just to Pendulum summon him out for free and just get that like insane floodgate on board just as like a utility effect to get that and the free draw. It's too much. This card is just way too much. So definitely glad that this card got hit. I knew at some point it would. It just kind of had to. It's too good, right? Dragonic Diagram. This specifically hits True Draco as well as Card of Demise as a hit to them as well. Also hits some other things, but we'll get to those in a little bit. It's just a tough hit. It just is. Dragonic Diagram is brutal kind of for them. So just one of their best consistency cards as well as just utility, getting them to anything in the entire archetype essentially. So yeah, that's pretty brutal. That's the 6 top decks. I don't even know if I'd call True Draco the 6th best deck. Maybe 7th, 8th, 9th, maybe even 10th for me, but still, apparently Konami thinks it. And also, Diagram can be abused in other decks as well, so I think they went after it for that reason as well. Moving on to some ancillary hits, some things that you might not have thought about directly once with some of these hits. One of which is Nemesis. With the new Nemesis Corridor card, this card, so many people were worried about because, like, it's just a free Colossus. Anybody can splash Colossus in their deck. All you have to do is have a monster banished, so this card can just jump on the field with his own effect. He doesn't take your normal summon. He activates in hand so that he does make Colossus live, and you can just make a Colossus with him. Colossus is banned now. So this card's like not useful in that way at all. You got to use him the way he's intended. Cool. Luna Lights, losing Azathoth is a pretty decent thing for them. Also, Luna Light Orcust, with Harp going away, definitely hurts them as well because they do kind of like to discard cards. And so just having the Orcus cards to discard is just nice to get extra value from that, but you can't anymore, so definitely a little hit there. I still think they might be playable, but just not as good. Harmonizing here representing every pendulum strategy. With Electromite gone, with Servant gone, you're losing one of the best starters for an engine in pendulums, as well as the best extra deck monster to ever be abused in pendulum. And so any pendulum deck gets hit, just generic, anything, it's just brutal. Then I'm talking about Endymion specifically. There are lists that use Endymion specifically. I thought they might get off unscathed when I saw that Electromite was hit, because they actually don't really use Electromite that much. They don't even really go into the extra deck. They get their negates through Master and Jackal King and other disruptions, not as much through the extra deck. So I thought that might be a thing, but then Endymion Servant gets hit to 1. It really doesn't hurt them that much, but it is a little nick to consistency. So I still think they survive, and I still think they're probably the best. I think they're probably the best pendulum variant at this point, but we'll have to see, obviously. Anything that plays Ib. I know this is like super generic and it's like stupid because it's just a card, and I'm just saying anything that played this, because I could say that with every single card. But there's so many different random decks that can abuse this card, because anything like Draconet, sign up money to get Draconet, just gets you a 1-card Ib and lets you combo. Same thing with Soul Lightning Oviraptor and Fossil Dig, 1-card Ib and combo. Such an amazing extender. It's literally like a +2, and that's too much for just like an in-between card. Like, this is supposed to be like a middle ground piece in the middle of your combo, and it just gets you a +2 on the way to that. Like, that's too much. That's too much. So I understand this. It hurts from like a World Chalice standpoint that it is one of their cards, but it's just too generically good, and it's got to go. At some point, it'll just be too much, and it'll just have to. Tempest Position is just Pendulum FTK. Not going to talk about that too much. We already talked about Azathoth, but I do want to mention that any other deck that plays Azathoth also kind of loses out on this. I don't know how many decks other than Lunalight played it, but I just wanted to make light of that there probably are some few other decks that also can use Azathoth, but whatever. Gem Knights, losing Brilliant Fusion is actually kind of substantial for them. They can search it, and also they don't brick on their bricks. Like, other decks have to play Gem Knight Fusion, or Brilliant Fusion, not Gem Knight Fusion, Brilliant Fusion, because you got to play the 2 Garnets in the deck, right? You have to play like the light that you never really want to draw, and you also have to play the Gem Knight. They already play those in their main deck. Like, they don't care about that at all. So it's definitely a bigger hit to them. I don't know how much that means for their FTK variant, but it is a hit in some way. And then anything else that, like I said, wants to play those bricks, can afford to play those bricks, because the boost in power for Brilliant Fusion is so big. Obviously, using the Predaplant engine to get to this even faster is very nice for them as well. But yeah, some decks are going to just appreciate this. And I think this would just be so good. I think they're just going to be multiple decks in Master Rule 5 that really want to make use of this. And I think this is them preemptively saying, you don't get an additional summon for some of your busted synchro combos, XCs combos, whatever. So yeah, preemptive hit in my opinion. I brought up Engage earlier, but that was in the context of Striker specifically. I also want to make note that so many decks play this engine. Striker Orcus, they lose both sides there. Like Striker True Draco, Striker Invoked also loses stuff. Like, and even stuff as like random as like Buster Blader, especially with their new generic Link 2 coming out. Like, this card would have been so strong, just getting you to Hornet Drones. Hornet Drones is a 1-card Link 2. That card paired with any like other engine card in Buster Blader can like get you to like some stuff. And so this is like randomly a good hit, like a big hit for decks like that, or any other deck that really was just kind of abusing the Striker engine, which I think is good because it's just too generically abusable in so many decks that I don't think you're just losing creativity in your game at some point. Red Reboot is also here. This is any deck that's just like weak to trap decks, or that could almost be any deck really. But yeah, this is a big hit because this was such a good card for any offensive deck going second into a trap deck. Negate the first trap, and boom, you just get to AOTK them most of the time straight through that. Now you don't get to do that. So very, very nice to see this going to. I mean, not very nice. I think this is kind of brutal for those players. I think this was a nice balancing card because if you lose the die roll against those decks, it could be brutal because like some decks just don't have a chance. Game 1, Game 2, maybe you can win because you get to go first, and Game 3, if you don't see enough side deck stuff, like you probably just lose again going second. So it could be very, very brutal. This was one of the few cards that is very, very strong in those matchups. So I do feel for those people. Still, Next up is True Kings, and while I do know that Lithosagem is here coming back for True Kings, I do think overall losing 2 diagram is like not enough. Like Lithosagem is cool, but only having 2 diagram, including terraforming, obviously. I don't think you're going to be able to get to Lithosagem and pop him off. I think you're going to have to open specific hands and not consistently enough, especially with only the 2 copies of diagram, that you're just not going to be able to set him up enough. And so I don't think he really matters at 1. I think it's fine that he's at 1. I don't think we'll really see much because I don't know how many decks like use him that well. So yeah, unfortunately, I think he might be a whiff at this moment because we don't have diagram at full power. And then the last one on the list, I believe this is the last one on the list. Yeah, any deck that just doesn't really care about using Demise, or like more so does care, but you know what I mean, like doesn't care about the drawbacks of Demise. I'm looking at Draco. I'm looking at just any stun deck, right? They already struggle with consistency in the form of like they have to see a monster, but they don't want to see too many monsters. And this card just lets them draw into more stuff, possibly getting them to a monster or more spells and traps to support their monster, or the right spells and traps to support their monster, whatever they want. And yeah, so it's just kind of brutal that it goes to 1. I don't think people are going to want to build their decks around a card with so many restrictions and only play 1 copy of it. Same kind of thing with Sekka's Light. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, guys. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to get through today. There's just a lot of hits here. This ban list was so huge. I'm really excited to see where the game goes. I really think the ceiling of the game has dropped down a good bit, more so than I think I've ever seen the ceiling drop in one ban list. And so I'm really excited to see what decks can rise to the occasion. How many of these tier 2s are going to take the place in tier 1? And maybe some new decks. Maybe Plunder Patrol jumps into tier 1. I think it might take Plunder Patrol till Eternity Code support to get into tier 1 or be a legit deck like that, but I still think it's a cool option. And I'm really excited to see where our new meta goes. Really excited. So, guys, definitely leave me your thoughts down below. Let me know if you think I missed anything. Maybe there's some weird kind of obscure things that also got affected by this list specifically that I didn't really notice here. Yeah. But I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. As always, stay tuned to the channel because there's just going to be more news. There's always news coming out, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for deck profiles. I got deck profiles coming once Ignition Assault drops. Not a ton, but I do have a couple that I can bring to you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, I will catch you in the next video.